When you realize your twin flame is loving someone else, there is a kind of pain that doesn't arrive with noise. No arguments. No dramatic goodbye. No final message. It arrives quietly like a shift in the air you can't explain, yet your body knows immediately. You may not have seen a photo. You may not have been told directly, and yet something inside you changed. One day you wake up and feel displaced. Not abandoned in the ordinary sense, but moved aside, as if the space where your soul once rested has been partially occupied by someone you have never met. This is often how it begins when your twin flame starts loving someone else. And if you are here listening to these words, there is a high chance you didn't discover it through evidence. You felt it. A sudden heaviness in your chest. An unfamiliar tightness in your throat. A quiet ache that doesn't belong to any current moment. You try to brush it off. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe it's just insecurity. Maybe this is my ego acting up. But the feeling doesn't leave. Because this is not ordinary jealousy. This is not possessiveness. This is not fear of competition. This is the moment your soul recognizes that the person who mirrors you most deeply has shifted their energy, and your entire system responds before your mind can catch up. This is the first and most disorienting stage of the test. The moment when your heart asks a question your mind is not ready to answer. If our connection is real, why does this hurt so much? Most people imagine twin flame pain as separation, the goodbye, the silence, the distance. But there is something far more destabilizing than absence. It is presence redirected elsewhere. When your twin flame loves someone else, the pain is not only about losing them. It is about watching the reflection of yourself turn toward a different mirror. And suddenly, everything you believed about special, unique, and unbreakable begins to tremble. At this stage, confusion dominates. You may feel foolish for caring so deeply, ashamed for feeling hurt when nothing was promised, embarrassed for still sensing them so strongly while they appear to move on with ease. Your mind starts questioning your sanity. If we were truly connected, wouldn't I feel chosen? If this was real, wouldn't the universe stop this from happening? If I mattered, wouldn't they feel this pain too? These questions circle endlessly with no satisfying answers. And here is the part few people talk about. This stage is not about them at all. It is about the collapse of an identity you didn't know you were wearing. Before this moment, a part of you quietly believed, they are my person. We will find our way back. This connection protects me from being replaced. When that illusion cracks, your soul enters shock. Not because love is gone, but because certainty is. And certainty is often the true addiction. The first wound activated here is not abandonment. It is existential insecurity. You are forced to confront a terrifying realization. A soul connection does not guarantee exclusivity in the physical world. And that truth feels unbearable at first. Because the ego was never built to hold paradox. The ego wants clarity, ownership, and reassurance. The soul, however, evolves through ambiguity. This is why the pain feels so sharp, as if two realities are tearing you apart. On one side, you still feel them. Their energy, their emotions, their presence in your dreams. On the other side, the physical world tells a different story. They are laughing with someone else, building routines with someone else, sharing moments that you once imagined, and you are left standing in between worlds. Not chosen, not released, not able to move on cleanly. This is where many people break. Some harden their hearts and deny the connection entirely. Some cling desperately, hoping to be proven right. Some turn the pain inward, convincing themselves they were never enough. But this chapter is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to reveal something uncomfortable but essential. Love without ownership is the curriculum. And you cannot pass this lesson without feeling everything. At this stage, the universe is not asking you to be spiritual or rise above pain. It is asking you to stay honest, to admit that it hurts, that you feel replaced, that your chest tightens when you imagine them touching someone else, that your soul screams while your pride stays silent. There is no bypass here. This moment strips you down to your rawest truth. And that truth is this: you are not grieving them. You are grieving the version of yourself that believed love would keep you safe from loss. That version must dissolve, because what comes next requires a different kind of strength. In the next chapter, we will explore why this pain triggers something deeper than jealousy, something that feels ancient, irrational, and almost spiritual in nature. The kind of jealousy that doesn't want to possess but wants to belong. The kind that has nothing to do with the other person, and everything to do with the parts of you that were never taught how to stand alone while still loving deeply. For now, let yourself sit with this truth. The moment your twin flame loves someone else is not the end of the connection. It is the moment your soul is asked a terrifying question. Can you love without needing to be chosen first? And your answer will determine everything that follows. Spiritual jealousy, when the soul feels replaced. There is a jealousy no one prepares you for. It does not scream. It does not accuse. It does not demand explanations. It sits quietly inside the chest, heavy and suffocating, like grief that has no funeral. When your twin flame loves someone else, jealousy does not arrive the way it does in ordinary relationships. There is no clear betrayal, no broken promise, no moral high ground, and yet the pain feels absolute. This is spiritual jealousy, a phenomenon rarely named, deeply misunderstood, and often dismissed as ego or insecurity. But if you have felt it, you know it carries a different weight. It does not feel petty. It feels existential. Because this jealousy is not about losing access to someone's body or time. It is about feeling displaced in the one place you thought was untouchable, the soul. First, you try to rationalize it. You tell yourself that love is not ownership, that spiritual connections transcend form, that their choices do not diminish your worth. But the body does not listen to philosophy. Your nervous system reacts as if something sacred has been violated. Your chest tightens when you imagine them holding someone else. Your stomach drops when you hear their name mentioned casually. Your heart races for no reason, as if bracing for impact. And then comes the most painful thought of all. What if the connection was never as special as I believed? This is where spiritual jealousy reveals its true face. It attacks meaning. Ordinary jealousy says, I want what they have. Spiritual jealousy whispers, was I ever irreplaceable? The wound cuts far deeper. Because on the twin flame path, the connection often becomes intertwined with identity. It is not just someone you love. It is someone who validated a truth about you. They mirrored your depth, your intensity, your unseen parts. And when that mirror turns towards someone else, you don't just feel left behind. You feel erased. This is why comparison becomes inevitable. You may find yourself imagining the other person in painful detail. Their face, their laugh, their voice, their way of touching your twin flame. Even if you have never seen them, your mind fills in the blanks mercilessly. And with each imagined scene comes a silent interrogation. Are they more peaceful than me? Easier to love? Less complicated? More aligned? You are not trying to compete. You are trying to understand why the universe seems to have chosen someone else to receive what felt divinely designed for you. This is the paradox of spiritual jealousy. You feel ashamed for having it because you believe you should be above it. And yet, you cannot escape it because it is not egoic in origin. It is the soul reacting to perceived displacement. In ancient attachment theory, this would be described as a primal threat to bonding. But in twin flame dynamics, it goes further. The soul interprets the situation as a fracture in reality itself. If they can love someone else, then what was this connection truly based on? Was it fate or projection? Truth or illusion? Awakening or fantasy? These questions do not seek answers. They seek safety. And safety feels impossibly far away when the one person who made you feel seen beyond form is now seeing someone else. At this stage, many people turn against themselves. They label their pain as weakness. They suppress their jealousy to appear evolved. They attempt spiritual bypassing, repeating affirmations while bleeding inside. But this only deepens the wound, because spiritual jealousy does not heal through denial. It heals through understanding its message. And the message is this: you are not afraid of losing them. You are afraid of losing the meaning you built around the connection. This jealousy emerges when love has been unconsciously fused with self-definition. Without realizing it, you may have believed, I am special because they see me. I am whole because we recognize each other. I am safe because this connection exists. When your twin flame chooses someone else, that entire structure collapses. And suddenly you are forced to ask, who am I without this reflection? This is why the pain feels spiritual. It challenges the foundation of identity. And here is the uncomfortable truth many teachings avoid. The twin flame journey is not designed to protect your sense of specialness. It is designed to dismantle it. Spiritual jealousy is the fire that burns through illusion. Not the illusion of love, but the illusion of being chosen as proof of worth. The jealousy is not here to punish you. It is here to expose the subtle dependency hidden beneath the language of soul connection. Because true spiritual love does not require exclusivity to exist. But the human heart often does, until it learns otherwise. This is where the path splits. Some people cling to spiritual superiority, convincing themselves they are the real twin, and the other person is merely a lesson. Others spiral into despair, believing they were delusional all along. Both reactions miss the invitation. The invitation is to stay present with the jealousy, not as an enemy but as a teacher. To ask it gently, what are you protecting? What are you afraid will disappear if I let go? If you listen carefully, the answer often emerges. I am afraid of being ordinary. I am afraid of being unseen. I am afraid that without this connection, I do not matter. These fears are not flaws. They are unhealed places asking for attention. And this is why twin flame love triggers them so powerfully. Because it touches the deepest longing, to be recognized at the level of essence. When that recognition appears threatened, the soul panics. But here is the truth that slowly begins to surface as the jealousy softens. No one can replace your essence. They may share experiences. They may share time. They may even share love. But they cannot occupy the exact frequency you hold. Spiritual jealousy fades not when the twin flame returns, but when you reclaim yourself. When your worth no longer depends on being chosen, mirrored, or preferred. When love becomes something you are, not something you wait to receive. This chapter is not about erasing jealousy. It is about allowing it to transform. In the next chapter, we will explore how this jealousy evolves into comparison, and how comparison, if consciously faced, becomes the doorway to emotional maturity rather than self-destruction. For now, let this land gently. The pain you feel is not proof that the connection was false. It is proof that it touched something real enough to destabilize the structures that were never meant to last. And that destabilization is not the end. It is the beginning of a deeper alignment, one that no one else can take from you. Comparison, the quiet war against the self. Comparison does not arrive suddenly. Seeps in. At first, it disguises itself as curiosity. Who are they? What are they like? What do they have that I don't? These questions feel harmless, even reasonable. After all, when your twin flame loves someone else, the mind searches for logic. A cause, a pattern, a missing piece that could make the pain make sense. But comparison is not searching for truth. It is searching for control. And when control cannot be found, it turns inward. Comparison becomes the quiet war you wage against yourself. Unlike spiritual jealousy, which feels raw and primal, comparison feels methodical. It evaluates. It measures. It ranks. It dissects. You begin to inventory your perceived flaws. Too intense. Too emotional. Too complex. Too broken. Then you imagine the other person as the opposite of everything you believe you are. Calmer. Simpler. Easier. More normal. Even if you know nothing about them, your mind constructs an image designed to justify the outcome. Because if they are better, then the world makes sense again. And this is where the real damage begins. Comparison doesn't hurt because the other person exists. It hurts because it convinces you that love is a competition, and that you have already lost. You replay memories searching for evidence. Moments where you were too much. Times you spoke your truth and felt the energy shift. Conversations where you sensed yourself shrinking to stay connected. In hindsight, every vulnerability becomes a liability. You rewrite the past with the cruel clarity of rejection. If only I had been less emotional. If only I had healed faster. If only I had known better. This is the illusion of hindsight control, the belief that you could have prevented the pain if you had been someone else. But this belief is false. And yet, it feels convincing because comparison feeds on uncertainty. The twin flame dynamic already destabilizes identity. Comparison completes the collapse. You no longer just miss them. You doubt yourself. And doubt is far more corrosive than loss. At this stage, many people begin to spiritualize their self-criticism. They tell themselves they are being honest, self-aware, or doing the work. But true self-awareness does not tear you apart. Comparison masquerading as growth will always leave you smaller, not wiser. This chapter of the journey forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. You were never in competition. Not with the other person. Not with any version of yourself. The competition exists only in the mind. A mind trying desperately to protect itself from the terror of unpredictability. Because if love is not guaranteed by depth, authenticity, or connection, then what is guaranteed? The ego hates this question. It wants formulas. It wants rules. It wants to believe that if you check enough boxes, you will be chosen. Comparison is the ego's attempt to reverse engineer love. And twin flame separation exposes the impossibility of that task. No amount of perfection could have prevented this phase. No version of you could have bypassed this lesson. The pain is not punishment. It is initiation. Comparison reaches its peak when you begin to compare paths, not people. You wonder if the other person is more aligned with your twin flame's life circumstances, more available, more stable, more acceptable to family, culture, or timing. And then the most dangerous comparison emerges. Maybe they fit better into the real world. This is where many souls abandon themselves. They decide that depth is a disadvantage, that sensitivity is a flaw, that spiritual awareness is impractical. They begin to dull their edges to survive. But the twin flame journey was never meant to make you smaller. It was meant to make you sovereign. Comparison collapses when you realize this. The connection did not happen because you were interchangeable. It happened because you were you. The qualities you now criticize are the same ones that activated the recognition in the first place. Your intensity was not too much, it was unfamiliar to someone still learning how to hold it. Your depth was not overwhelming, it was confronting. Your truth was not inconvenient, it was destabilizing to structures built on avoidance. Comparison assumes that love chooses based on optimization. The soul does not operate that way. Sometimes love chooses based on capacity, not depth. And capacity changes over time. This is a hard truth to accept. Your twin flame loving someone else does not mean they found someone more evolved. It often means they found someone safer for where they currently are. Safer does not mean deeper. Easier does not mean truer. But comparison blinds you to this nuance. It collapses complexity into hierarchy. And hierarchy always places you below. This is why comparison must be seen clearly, not resisted, not indulged. Seen. Because once seen, it loses power. The turning point in this chapter comes when you ask a different question. Not, what do they have that I don't? But why am I measuring my worth through someone else's choice? That question opens a door. It reveals that comparison is not about the other person at all. It is about a fear of being unchosen in a world where choice feels arbitrary. This fear is deeply human. And twin flame love magnifies it because the connection feels fated, until it doesn't. But fate was never about outcome. It was about encounter. The encounter already happened. It already changed you. No one can undo that. When you release comparison, something unexpected occurs. The pain does not vanish, but it softens. Because you stop adding judgment to grief. You stop attacking yourself for being exactly who the connection required you to be. You begin to see that emotional maturity is not about becoming more appealing. It is about becoming more self-honoring. In the next chapter, we will explore how this self-honoring leads to a radical shift. Learning to trust the invisible bond without needing physical validation. A stage that feels impossible until comparison loosens its grip. For now, hold this truth gently. You were never meant to win. You were meant to awaken. And awakening begins the moment you stop measuring your soul against someone else's reflection. Trusting the invisible bond, when proof disappears. There comes a moment on the twin flame path when you realize that nothing external can reassure you anymore. No message. No sign. No confession. No reunion. And strangely, not even pain. Because pain at least confirms that something matters. But this stage is different. This is the stage where proof disappears. Your twin flame is still alive, still present in the world, yet increasingly absent from your direct experience. Their life unfolds elsewhere. Their love flows in another direction. Their choices offer you no evidence that the bond you felt was ever real. And this is where the real test begins. Can you trust something you cannot see, touch, or confirm? Up until now, the connection had manifestations, synchronicities, intense eye contact, energetic pulls, conversations that felt timeless, moments that defied logic. These experiences anchored the belief. But when your twin flame loves someone else, the universe removes those anchors. Suddenly, there are no signs to cling to, no reassurance arriving by accident, no mirrors reflecting your longing back to you, only silence. And silence is terrifying when your faith is untrained. This chapter is not about romantic hope. It is about spiritual integrity, because trusting an invisible bond is not the same as waiting. Waiting implies expectation. Trust implies surrender. Most people confuse the two. They say they trust the connection, while secretly monitoring reality for evidence. A text, a glance, a delay in commitment with a third party. When none of these appear, the trust collapses. Because it was never trust, it was conditional belief. This stage strips away conditionality. You are asked to sit in a truth that offers no reward. You may never be chosen in form, and still the bond may exist. This paradox feels cruel. Why would the universe ask you to hold something with no guarantee of outcome? Because this is the moment where love transforms from attachment into alignment. The invisible bond is not meant to be proven. It is meant to be integrated. First, this feels like loss of power. You are no longer special in the visible story. You are no longer the one in the narrative others can see. You are no longer validated by circumstance. Your value is no longer mirrored. And without mirrors, identity dissolves. This is why many people abandon the path here. They declare the connection an illusion. They label it delusion. They suppress their sensitivity to survive. And that choice is understandable, because trusting what cannot be verified feels irresponsible in a world that rewards certainty. But the twin flame journey was never meant to be lived externally. It was meant to awaken inner authority. The invisible bond cannot be trusted from the mind. The mind demands evidence. It wants timelines and guarantees. It wants to know why and when. But the invisible bond is felt through the nervous system, not analyzed by thought. It is recognized through resonance, not reason. This is why, even when everything points away from the connection, something in you remains calm beneath the grief. A quiet knowing. Not hope. Not fantasy. Knowing. This knowing does not say, they will come back. It says, what we shared was real regardless of outcome. And that distinction changes everything. Because when you stop needing the bond to lead somewhere, you finally meet it as it is. Energy without agenda. Connection without possession. Love without claim. This is the level where spiritual maturity is born. But it comes at a cost. You must release the desire to be proven right. You must let go of the need for validation. You must risk being misunderstood, even by yourself. Trusting the invisible bond means accepting that no one else needs to believe you. Not friends. Not spiritual teachers. Not your twin flame. The bond exists whether it is acknowledged or not. And that realization is deeply lonely. There is grief in knowing that something sacred can exist privately, with no audience, no recognition, no closure. But there is also freedom. Because when nothing needs to be proven, nothing can be taken from you. The invisible bond cannot be threatened by a third party. It cannot be replaced. It cannot be diminished by choices made in fear, timing, or unconsciousness. It exists in a dimension beyond comparison. This does not mean you idealize or romanticize the situation. Trust is not denial. You still see reality clearly. You still accept that they are with someone else. You still feel waves of sadness, anger, longing. But those feelings no longer define the truth. They move through you without rewriting it. This is the difference between attachment and trust. Attachment says, this must look a certain way. Trust says, this is what it is, even if I don't like it. And here is the hardest part. Trusting the invisible bond requires you to stop seeking it in them. You stop scanning their behavior for signs. You stop interpreting every coincidence as a message. You stop negotiating with the universe. Instead, you turn inward. You feel the connection where it has always lived, inside your own consciousness. And when you do this, something unexpected happens. The intensity softens. Not because the bond weakens, but because it no longer needs to shout to be acknowledged. It becomes quieter, steadier, more integrated. Less consuming. More grounding. This is where many people finally breathe again. Not because the situation changed, but because they did. Trust replaces obsession. Presence replaces longing. Acceptance replaces resistance. And with that shift, emotional adulthood begins. In the next chapter, we will explore how this trust lays the foundation for emotional maturity. How learning to hold love without ownership transforms not only this connection, but every relationship that follows. For now, let this truth settle. The invisible bond does not ask you to wait. It asks you to become someone who does not need proof to know what they lived. And that knowing, once embodied, can never be taken away. Emotional maturity, loving without ownership. There is a moment in this journey when you realize something unsettling. The pain did not come from losing them. It came from losing control over how love was supposed to look. This realization marks the threshold between emotional reactivity and emotional maturity. Until now, love may have felt like something that happened to you. Something that overtook your nervous system. Something that defined your worth, your direction, your sense of meaning. Twin flame love intensifies this experience because it bypasses logic and goes straight to the core. It awakens parts of you that ordinary relationships never touched. And when something that powerful slips out of your grasp, the instinct is to tighten, not open. But emotional maturity begins where tightening ends. It begins when you stop asking, "How do I get them back?" and start asking, "Who am I becoming through this?" This shift is subtle but profound. First, maturity feels like loss. Because immature love, though intense, offers certainty. It believes in roles. In destiny with guarantees. In effort equaling outcome. Mature love does not promise any of that. Mature love asks you to stand in your own center, even when the outcome remains unknown. This is why emotional maturity is not attractive to the ego. The ego wants leverage. It wants assurance. It wants to know that vulnerability will be rewarded. Maturity offers none of those comforts. Instead, it offers sovereignty. When your twin flame loves someone else, maturity is not about pretending you don't care. It is about refusing to abandon yourself in order to maintain connection. This is where many people misunderstand healing. They think healing means letting go emotionally, becoming indifferent, detached, unaffected. But true emotional maturity does not numb you. Stabilizes you. You still feel love. You still feel sadness. You may still feel longing. But you no longer act from those feelings. You act with awareness of them. This is the difference between being driven by emotion and being guided by it. Emotional immaturity says, "If I feel this strongly, something must be done." Emotional maturity says, "I can feel this strongly and still choose my response." This distinction changes everything. Because when you stop trying to manage the connection, you start managing your inner world. And your inner world is the only place where real power exists. Loving without ownership does not mean loving less. It means loving without conditions that destroy your self-respect. It means no longer negotiating your worth through proximity. No longer measuring your value by whether someone chooses you in a particular moment. No longer shrinking or performing to remain relevant in someone else's life. This is where boundaries emerge naturally. Not walls. Not defenses. Boundaries. You stop chasing clarity from someone who is unavailable. You stop offering emotional labor without reciprocity. You stop waiting in energetic limbo. Not out of bitterness, but out of self-honoring. And this is the paradox. The moment you stop trying to hold the connection together, you finally stop falling apart. Emotional maturity also requires grieving the fantasy fully, not suppressing it, not dismissing it as illusion, but honoring it for what it was. A meaningful chapter, not a contract. You grieve the future you imagined, the conversations you thought you'd have, the shared growth you envisioned. This grief is sacred, because it clears the space where entitlement once lived. And without entitlement, love becomes clean. At this stage, something shifts in how you see your twin flame. You no longer see them as the one who must choose you. You begin to see them as a human being, complex, flawed, evolving, afraid. Someone capable of deep connection and deep avoidance. Someone whose choices reflect their capacity, not your worth. This clarity does not diminish the connection, humanizes it, and in doing so, it frees you. Emotional maturity allows two truths to coexist. You can love someone deeply, and you can accept that they may not walk beside you. This coexistence is what most people never learn. They believe love must either attach or detach. Maturity introduces a third option: relate without possession. This is not passive. It is incredibly active. It requires constant inner regulation, choosing not to check their social media, choosing not to interpret silence as meaning, choosing not to reopen wounds for familiarity. These choices are not dramatic. They are quiet, and they are powerful, because each time you choose yourself without hardening your heart, you rewire the nervous system that once equated love with instability. You teach your body that connection does not require self-erasure, that intimacy does not require anxiety, that love does not require suffering to be real. This is the deeper healing twin flame journey's initiate. Not reunion, but emotional adulthood. And here is the truth few teachings say aloud. Many twin flame connections do not culminate in union because union is not the goal. Integration is. Integration means the qualities you recognized in them, presence, depth, authenticity, intensity, are no longer outsourced. They become embodied. You stop searching for mirrors because you have become reflective. This does not mean you will never desire partnership again. On the contrary, emotionally mature love becomes more possible after this phase. Because you no longer need another person to complete an identity. You meet relationships as a whole being, not a seeker. And that changes who you attract. You may notice that as you stabilize emotionally, the pull toward your twin flame changes. It becomes less consuming, less urgent, less dramatic. Not because the connection disappears, but because it is no longer filling a wound. It becomes something quieter, like a knowing rather than a craving. This is the sign that maturity is taking root. You stop asking the universe for answers. You start listening to your own alignment. And alignment always speaks through peace, even when circumstances remain unresolved. This chapter is not about transcending desire. It is about transcending dependency. Dependency on outcome. Dependency on validation. Dependency on being chosen. When that dependency dissolves, love becomes an expression, not a demand. In the next chapter, we will explore what happens after emotional maturity stabilizes, how surrender replaces struggle, and how letting go of control creates space for outcomes you could never force. For now, let this truth anchor you. Loving without ownership is not a loss. It is the moment love stops costing you your selfhood. And that is not the end of the journey. That is where it truly begins. Surrender when control finally releases. There is a quiet exhaustion that sets in after emotional maturity takes root. Not the kind that comes from overwhelm, but the kind that follows long resistance. You realize you have been holding your breath for a very long time. Holding hope. Holding grief. Holding vigilance. Holding yourself together. And one day something loosens. Not because everything is resolved, but because you can no longer justify the effort of control. This is surrender. Not collapse. Not giving up. Not resignation. Surrender is the moment you stop negotiating with reality. Until now, some part of you may still have been managing the connection. Even in maturity, there can be subtle strategies. Staying energetically available. Leaving the door not fully closed. Trusting the invisible bond while quietly hoping it would change form. Surrender removes even that. It says, I am done steering. This is one of the most misunderstood phases of the twin flame journey. People often equate surrender with abandonment of desire, as if letting go means you never cared. But surrender is not emotional amnesia. It is emotional honesty without agenda. You do not erase longing. You simply stop organizing your life around it. The moment surrender begins, there is often grief, but it is a different kind of grief. Less dramatic, less urgent, more spacious. It feels like saying goodbye to a version of yourself who believed effort could bend fate. This is a painful goodbye, because effort once felt empowering. If you tried hard enough, If you healed fast enough, if you waited patiently enough, then maybe the outcome would align. Surrender dismantles this belief completely. It shows you that love is not earned through endurance. It is either mutual in form or it is not. And no amount of spiritual insight can substitute reciprocity. This realization is not bitter. It is clarifying. When you stop trying to influence the connection, your energy returns to you. And for the first time in a long time, you feel grounded. Your nervous system begins to downshift. You sleep more deeply. Your appetite stabilizes. Your thoughts slow. This is not detachment from love. It is detachment from hypervigilance. The part of you that was constantly scanning for meaning finally rests. Surrender also changes how you perceive time. Before, time felt like an enemy. Every day without movement felt like evidence of loss. Every delay intensified anxiety. But surrender dissolves urgency. You stop counting days. Stop interpreting silence. Stop framing your life around a potential future that may never arrive. Instead, you begin to inhabit the present. Not as a concept but as an embodied experience. And this is where something unexpected happens. You start to feel available again. Not to your twin flame. To life. You notice beauty without attaching it to meaning. You laugh without guilt. You make plans without wondering how they fit into the connection. This can feel disorienting at first. As if you are betraying something sacred by moving forward. But that belief belongs to attachment, not love. Love does not require stagnation. Love does not demand sacrifice of aliveness. Surrender is the point where you trust that what is meant for you will meet you without effort. And what requires effort to sustain is not alignment, it is compensation. This phase often brings a subtle identity shift. You no longer identify as someone waiting. You no longer define yourself by a story that centers absence. You become simply yourself again, but with depth earned through loss. This does not mean the twin flame disappears from your inner world. They may still arise in dreams, in moments of quiet, in memories that carry warmth rather than ache. But they no longer dominate your emotional climate. They are part of your history, not the axis of your present. And this is where true surrender proves its power. Because surrender does not close doors. It removes obsession. It creates neutrality. And neutrality is the most fertile ground for truth. If reunion were ever to occur, surrender is the only state where it could be healthy. Not from need. Not from fear. Not from unresolved longing. But from wholeness. And if reunion does not occur, surrender ensures that you do not shrink around that absence. You continue to expand. This is why surrender is not the end of the twin flame journey. It is the end of suffering as identity. Many people fear surrender because they believe it means losing the connection forever. But what surrender actually dissolves is illusion. Illusion that love must look a certain way. Illusion that effort guarantees outcome. Illusion that holding on proves devotion. Devotion without surrender becomes control. Surrender returns devotion to purity. This phase often comes with a deep spiritual quiet. Not dramatic awakenings. Not constant insights. But a grounded peace. A sense that you are finally standing on solid ground within yourself. And from that ground, life begins to respond differently. You attract relationships that feel calm, not consuming. You make choices from alignment, not reaction. You trust your timing, not because everything works out, but because you no longer measure your worth through outcome. In the next chapter, we will explore what unfolds after surrender, how integration reshapes your identity, your relationships, and your understanding of love itself. For now, allow this truth to settle into your body. Surrender is not the moment you stop loving. It is the moment love stops costing you your peace. And peace, once reclaimed, becomes the compass for everything that follows. Integration, becoming whole without the outcome. After surrender, something subtle but irreversible begins. You stop asking the universe questions that once consumed you. Not because they were answered, but because they no longer govern you. This is integration. Integration is not a dramatic breakthrough. It does not arrive with fireworks or certainty. It arrives quietly, almost unnoticed, like a muscle that has healed so well you forget it was ever injured. Integration is what happens when the twin flame connection is no longer something you are in, but something that has moved through you. At this stage, the story loosens its grip. You no longer rehearse conversations that will never happen. You no longer replay moments searching for hidden meaning. You no longer wonder which version of reality was true. All of it becomes true, and none of it defines you. This is the moment when the connection stops being a question and becomes a chapter. Not erased. Not minimized. Integrated. Before this phase, much of your energy was fragmented. One part of you lived in the present. Another lived in memory. Another hovered in imagined futures. Integration gathers these fragments back into one place. Now, and being fully present feels unfamiliar at first. Because presence has no drama, no longing, no anticipation, no ache to solve. Just being. For someone who has lived inside intensity, this calm can feel empty. But it is not emptiness. It is wholeness without stimulation. This is where many people misinterpret integration as loss of depth. They worry that because the intensity has faded, something sacred must have died. But intensity was never the marker of truth. Intensity was the marker of activation. Integration is what happens after activation completes its work. You begin to notice that the qualities you once projected onto your twin flame now live within you. Their confidence, you embody it. Their authenticity, you practice it. Their emotional depth, you hold it without fear. What once felt external becomes internalized. This is the true purpose of mirroring. Not to bind you to another person, but to reveal dormant aspects of yourself. When integration occurs, the question shifts again. Not will we ever reunite? But who am I now that I no longer need the answer? And that question opens a new world. You start relating to others differently. You no longer scan for intensity to validate connection. You no longer equate anxiety with chemistry. You no longer confuse familiarity with fate. Relationships become calmer, cleaner, more grounded. And because of that, they feel unfamiliar at first. You may even find yourself bored, not because there is no depth, but because your nervous system is no longer addicted to dysregulation. This is one of the most misunderstood outcomes of the twin flame journey. It recalibrates what love feels like. Love becomes steady rather than consuming, present rather than overwhelming, mutual rather than destabilizing. And this recalibration is irreversible. You cannot go back to loving from fragmentation once you have tasted integration. This does not mean you lose sensitivity. On the contrary, you become more sensitive but less reactive. You feel more but suffer less. Because feeling no longer threatens your stability. Integration also transforms how you hold memory. Your twin flame no longer appears as a wound or a fantasy. They become a symbol, a marker of awakening, threshold you crossed. You can think of them with tenderness rather than urgency, gratitude rather than grief. And this is where forgiveness enters naturally. Not forced forgiveness, not spiritual bypassing, but understanding. You understand that both of you were operating from the capacity you had at the time. That love did not fail. It evolved beyond form. That timing was not cruel, it was precise. This understanding does not rewrite history, contextualizes it. And in doing so, it releases you from needing the past to be different. Integration also brings clarity about boundaries. You no longer tolerate ambiguity where clarity is required. You no longer romanticize inconsistency. You no longer chase potential at the expense of presence. You value reciprocity. Not as a demand but as a standard. This is a profound shift. Because earlier in the journey, you may have believed that spiritual love transcends human needs. Integration teaches you that transcendence without embodiment is incomplete. You are not less spiritual for wanting mutuality. You are more integrated. This is where many people feel ready for real partnership, whether or not it includes their twin flame. And here is the paradox that often emerges. When you no longer need reunion, you are finally capable of it. Not because it will happen, but because if it did, it would not consume you. It would meet you. Integration dissolves fantasy. It also dissolves fear. You no longer fear losing the connection because you are no longer outsourcing your wholeness to it. You no longer fear being alone because you have learned how to inhabit yourself. This is the quiet confidence that follows deep spiritual work. Not arrogance. Not detachment, but grounded presence. And presence is magnetic. Life responds to it. Opportunities align. Relationships feel simpler. Choices become clearer. Not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer split. The twin flame journey does not end in union or separation. It ends in coherence, where who you are, how you love, and how you live are no longer at odds. And from coherence, love flows naturally. Not urgently, not desperately, but freely. In the next chapter, we will explore the final transformation, how meaning replaces longing, and how the twin flame connection becomes a compass rather than a destination. For now, allow this truth to settle. Integration is not about forgetting what happened. It is about no longer being organized around it. You were never meant to live inside the connection. You were meant to become what the connection awakened. And that becoming is the real completion of the journey. Meaning over longing, when the connection becomes a compass. There comes a stage in the twin flame journey when longing no longer dominates your inner world. Not because it disappeared completely, not because you stopped caring, but because it lost its authority. This is the moment when meaning replaces longing. Earlier, longing felt sacred, felt like proof that the connection mattered, proof that something profound had occurred. Longing gave the experience weight. But over time, you begin to notice something subtle and unsettling. Longing keeps you oriented toward absence. It keeps your energy pointed at what is not here, what is not happening, what is not choosing you. And while longing once opened your heart, it eventually narrows your life. Meaning does the opposite. Meaning does not ask, why didn't this work? Meaning asks, what did this awaken in me? This shift marks emotional and spiritual adulthood. Because adults do not organize their lives around yearning. They organize their lives around purpose. When the twin flame connection becomes a compass rather than a destination, everything changes. You stop asking where the connection will lead. You start noticing where it already has. You see how it reshaped your values, how it dismantled illusions about love, how it forced you to confront your patterns of attachment, avoidance, and self-abandonment. You recognize that the connection was never meant to be a place you arrive. It was meant to be a direction you grow toward. Earlier in the journey, love felt like gravity, pulling you toward another person. Now, love feels like orientation guiding you back to yourself. This is not a loss of romance. It is a refinement of it. Romance matures into reverence. Reverence for the encounter. Reverence for what it activated. Reverence for the version of you that survived the transformation. Meaning emerges when you stop interpreting the connection as unfinished business. Unfinished business keeps the nervous system activated. It keeps you alert, scanning unresolved. Meaning brings closure without answers. You may never know why things unfolded the way they did. You may never receive acknowledgement, apology, or explanation. But you no longer need them. Because the meaning is embodied, not explained. You live it. You live it in how you love now with clearer boundaries. You live it in how you choose without abandoning your intuition. You live it in how you stay present, even when uncertainty remains. This is where the twin flame stops being a personal obsession and becomes a universal teaching. You begin to see the pattern everywhere. In friendships, in creative work, in spiritual practice. The lesson repeats in different forms, but it no longer destabilizes you. Because you recognize it. You recognize when intensity tries to replace intimacy. When longing tries to replace connection. When fantasy tries to replace truth. And you gently choose differently. This is the quiet mastery that follows deep awakening. Meaning also changes how you hold love. Love is no longer something that happens to you. It is something you practice. You practice presence. You practice honesty. You practice staying open without losing yourself. You understand now that love is not validated by suffering. Pain may accompany love, but it is not its measure. Earlier, you might have believed that the depth of pain reflected the depth of connection. Now you know better. Depth is reflected in integration, not devastation. Meaning also dissolves the need for labels. You no longer need to know whether this person was truly your twin flame, karmic partner, or catalyst. Those distinctions served you when you needed a framework. Now they feel irrelevant. What matters is that the encounter fulfilled its function. It awakened you. An awakening does not require permanence. It requires impact. This is a difficult truth for the part of you that once believed destiny meant continuity. But destiny, as you now understand it, is about alignment, not endurance. Some encounters are destined to end because their purpose is to begin you. When longing fades, you may experience a strange mixture of relief and grief. Relief because the ache no longer defines your days. Grief because longing was familiar, almost intimate. Letting go of longing can feel like letting go of a language you once spoke fluently. But what replaces it is richer. Meaning does not demand your attention. It supports your life quietly from beneath. You feel it when you make choices that honor your truth. When you walk away from misalignment without drama. When you trust your inner compass even without external confirmation. This is how the twin flame connection continues to live. Not in reunion but in orientation. It becomes the reason you no longer tolerate half-love. The reason you recognize red flags early. The reason you value emotional safety. The reason you choose growth over fantasy. In this way, the connection never truly leaves you. It simply changes function. It stops being the center of your life and becomes the foundation of your wisdom. This is also where spiritual humility emerges. You no longer claim specialness because of the connection. You no longer identify as chosen or awakened above others. You see that many people undergo similar initiations through different stories. The form varies. The function is the same. Love dismantles the ego so something more authentic can emerge. Meaning also opens space for joy. Not the euphoric highs of early connection, but a grounded joy. The joy of coherence. The joy of self-trust. The joy of living in alignment with your values. You laugh more freely. You rest more deeply. You feel connected to life rather than consumed by one narrative. This joy does not erase the past. It integrates it. And integration is the highest form of respect. As this chapter closes, there is often one final realization. You were never meant to chase love. You were meant to be guided by it. The twin flame connection served as a compass, pointing you toward truth, authenticity, and emotional sovereignty. Once you learned how to read that compass, you no longer needed to stare at it constantly. You trust it now. In the next and final chapter, we will explore what comes after meaning stabilizes, how you move forward without carrying the weight of the journey, and how love becomes something you live rather than seek. For now, let this truth anchor you. Longing kept you attached to the past. Meaning carries you into the future. And the future does not ask you to wait. It asks you to walk, guided by everything you have already become. Emotional maturity, loving without possession. There is a moment on the twin flame journey that feels almost invisible from the outside, yet monumental on the inside. It is the moment when jealousy no longer screams, when comparison no longer burns, when the mind finally loosens its grip on the question, why not me? This chapter is not about pain anymore. It is about growth. Because when your twin flame loves someone else, the final lesson is not suffering. It is emotional maturity. And emotional maturity is not coldness. It is not detachment. It is not pretending you do not care. Emotional maturity is loving without possession. 1. The difference between pain and immaturity. Many people confuse emotional pain with emotional immaturity. Pain is natural. Pain is human. Pain is unavoidable when deep bonds are activated. Immaturity, however, is what we do with that pain. Immaturity says, if you loved me, you would choose me. If we are twin flames, you shouldn't be with anyone else. Your happiness with them invalidates what we had. Maturity whispers something far more difficult. I feel pain, but I do not weaponize it. I feel longing, but I do not demand. I feel love, but I do not imprison it. The twin flame journey does not test how deeply you can suffer. It tests how deeply you can love without controlling. 2. Why emotional maturity is the final gate. You can survive abandonment wounds. You can survive separation. You can survive silence. But emotional maturity is the final gate because it demands something radical. Integrity of the heart. This is the stage where you stop checking their social media to hurt yourself. You stop imagining scenarios where they regret choosing someone else. You stop waiting for karma to punish them. Not because you no longer care, but because your soul no longer feeds on emotional chaos. At this stage, the question shifts from, "Why did this happen to me?" to, "What kind of lover am I becoming?" 3. Loving without possession is not passive. Many misunderstand surrender. They think surrender means giving up your truth, accepting crumbs, staying silent forever. This is false. Loving without possession does not mean tolerating disrespect. It does not mean waiting endlessly. It does not mean denying your worth. It means this: I choose love, not fear, as my inner posture, regardless of outcomes. You can walk away and love. You can close a door and bless. You can detach and remain emotionally honest. Possession says, "You owe me your future." Maturity says, "I honor the connection, but I do not own your path." 4. The death of the fantasy lover. One of the most painful but liberating moments in Chapter 9 is the death of the fantasy. Not the person, but the fantasy version of them. The one who would finally choose you, would see your worth in time, would awaken because of your love. This fantasy lover was never real. They were a projection created by longing. Emotional maturity arrives when you grieve not just the relationship, but the version of the story you wanted to live. And grief, when done consciously, becomes freedom. 5. Comparison ends when self-respect begins. As long as you compare yourself to the third party, emotional maturity remains unreachable. Comparison asks, are they prettier? Are they more stable? What do they have that I don't? Maturity asks, why am I measuring my worth through someone else's choices? Here is the uncomfortable truth. People do not choose partners based on soul depth. They choose based on capacity. Capacity to stay. Capacity to commit. Capacity to face intimacy. Your twin flame choosing someone else does not mean they are more worthy. It often means they are safer for where your twin flame is emotionally. And maturity allows you to see that without self-betrayal. 6. Emotional responsibility. Owning your inner world. At this stage, something profound happens. You stop blaming them, the connection, destiny, timing, and you begin to take emotional responsibility. This does not mean self-blame. It means self-leadership. You ask, what is this teaching me about attachment? Where do I abandon myself in love? What parts of me seek validation instead of wholeness? Emotional maturity is when love becomes a mirror, not a battlefield. 7. Loving them as they are, not as you need them to be. This is perhaps the hardest truth of Chapter 9. You cannot mature emotionally while loving someone for who you need them to be. Mature love sees clearly their limitations, their fears, their emotional capacity, and still chooses compassion without illusion. This is where unconditional love is often misunderstood. Unconditional love does not mean unconditional access. It means, I love you without conditions, but I do not abandon myself to do so. 8. When the heart becomes quiet, there is a quietness that comes with emotional maturity. Not numbness, not indifference, but a grounded stillness. You no longer feel the urge to prove your value, your depth, your spiritual understanding. You stop asking signs to reassure you. You stop bargaining with the universe. You simply are. And paradoxically, this is when the energetic cord stabilizes instead of tearing. 9. The irony. This is when union energy returns. Here is the paradox few talk about. When you no longer need them to choose you, the union energy often returns. Not always physically, not always in 3D form, but energetically. Synchronicities soften. Dreams feel peaceful, not desperate. Love feels warm, not sharp. Because union is not a reward. It is a frequency. And emotional maturity is the frequency of wholeness. 10. Question for the soul. So let me ask you gently, if love does not require possession, if connection does not require control, if truth does not require outcome, then who are you becoming through this journey? Not who you lose, not who they choose, but who you are when love no longer hurts your dignity. Your twin flame loving someone else is not the end of your story. It is the moment your soul graduates from longing to embodiment, from wanting love to being love. And that is not loss. That is power, integration and freedom, living beyond the connection. There is a unique stillness that comes at the end of the twin flame journey. Not the end of love itself, but the end of the cycle of suffering, longing, and obsession. This is the stage where integration and freedom converge, and where your soul finally learns how to carry the essence of the connection without being defined or consumed by it. Earlier chapters explored the pain, surrender, and emotional growth that come with seeing your twin flame love someone else. They laid the foundation for emotional maturity, teaching you to love without possession, to surrender without losing yourself, and to find meaning where longing once reigned. Now integration is the ultimate act, taking all these lessons and embodying them fully in your life. 1. What integration really means. Integration is not simply accepting that your twin flame is with someone else. It is internalizing the awakening that the connection initiated in you. Every feeling you experienced, longing, jealousy, grief, passion, and ecstasy, is not discarded. It is woven into the fabric of who you are, enriching your heart, your mind, and your spirit. Integration is a quiet revolution inside you. It transforms pain into wisdom. It turns longing into insight. It converts obsession into calm presence. In other words, integration is not about removing the connection from your life. It is about carrying it differently, from a place of wholeness rather than dependency. 2. How integration frees you from external validation. Before integration, much of your emotional energy was bound to external factors. Did they text you back? Are they thinking of you? Are you still important in their world? Integration releases this dependency. Your value no longer hinges on someone else's choices or recognition. You understand deeply that your soul's worth exists independent of anyone else's love or attention. This freedom is radical. It shifts your perspective entirely. Relationships become opportunities for genuine connection, not tests of validation. Life choices are made based on alignment, not on maintaining proximity or influence over another person. Spiritual and emotional energy previously consumed by longing is reclaimed, fueling personal growth, creativity, and self-expression. 3. Embodying lessons without attachment. Integration is the process of embodying the lessons learned from the twin flame journey. These lessons are deeply personal, yet universal in nature. Trust in the invisible bond. You carry the awareness that some connections transcend physical presence. Emotional sovereignty. You can feel deeply without being overwhelmed. Loving without ownership. You know that love is a reflection of inner completeness, not control. Surrender to what is. You accept reality without needing to manipulate outcomes. These are not abstract concepts. They are lived experiences. You practice them in your daily life, in how you respond to challenges, how you communicate, and how you allow love to flow freely. 4. Freedom from the what-ifs. One of the heaviest burdens in the twin flame journey is the endless cycle of what-ifs. What if they realize I am the one? What if timing were different? What if I had done more, been more, loved more? Integration dissolves these chains. You no longer live in hypotheticals. You stop trying to rewrite history or predict the future. You anchor in what is, fully, courageously, and without attachment to outcome. This does not mean you no longer feel grief or longing. It means your identity is no longer suspended on them. Your life flows forward, guided by purpose, not by uncertainty. 5. Transforming grief into wisdom. The grief of seeing your twin flame with someone else is undeniable, profound, and often enduring. But through integration, grief is transformed rather than suppressed. You recognize it as proof of love's depth, not a failure of worth. You allow yourself to feel fully, without letting pain dominate your life. You reinterpret experiences from the lens of growth, rather than loss. This transformation is subtle but powerful. It rewires your nervous system, teaching you that love is safe, even when it is unreciprocated in the form you desire. 6. Living beyond attachment. Integration brings freedom from attachment to specific outcomes. You stop needing your twin flame to fulfill a certain narrative. You release the compulsion to monitor, manipulate, or control. Attachment once looked like checking social media obsessively. rewriting conversations in your head, constantly comparing yourself to their partner, defining your self-worth by their choices. Now, attachment is replaced with observant love and personal sovereignty. You hold space for the connection as it is, not as you wish it to be. This is the essence of freedom. You are whole whether or not union manifests in 3D reality. 7. Integration shapes future relationships. One of the most profound effects of integration is its impact on future connections. You no longer bring old wounds or dependency patterns into new relationships. You recognize unhealthy attachment before it can take root. You attract relationships that mirror emotional maturity rather than codependence. You engage in love that is balanced, reciprocal, and conscious. Integration ensures that love becomes empowering rather than destabilizing. The lessons learned from the twin flame journey are not wasted. They inform every bond you cultivate moving forward. 8. The spiritual dimension of integration. Integration is not only emotional, it is spiritual. The twin flame connection awakened your consciousness. Integration allows this awakening to remain embodied, rather than fleeting or dependent on external circumstances. Spiritually, integration means recognizing that love is not an event, it is a state of being. Understanding that soul connections serve evolution, not gratification. Living with inner alignment rather than external validation. Experiencing life as a mirror of your consciousness, rather than a reflection of someone else's choices. This stage transforms suffering into wisdom and longing into purpose. 9. A new relationship with life itself. Perhaps the most beautiful aspect of integration is the relationship you develop with life itself. Life is no longer something that happens to you, it is something you navigate with awareness. Challenges are seen as opportunities, not punishments. Connection and separation are understood as complementary, not contradictory. Presence rather than outcome becomes the guiding principle. This is the ultimate freedom, to experience life fully, without being defined by external love or loss. 10. The true completion of the journey. The twin flame journey is often mistaken for a story about union or separation. In reality, it is a story about you, your growth, your embodiment, and your awakening. Completion does not mean they return. Completion does not mean reconciliation. Completion means you are whole, with or without their presence in your physical reality. When integration is achieved, you carry the connection as a compass, not a chain. You love freely without need or manipulation. You embody the lessons of the journey in every choice, relationship, and action. You live from your true self, not from longing or fear. And in this wholeness, freedom is realized. You are no longer bound to the highs and lows of the connection. You no longer define your existence by another person's choices. You are fully present, fully alive, and fully yours. The twin flame journey, especially when your counterpart loves someone else, is one of the most profound spiritual tests imaginable. It pushes the soul to its limits, dismantles attachment, and forces you to confront the illusions of control and possession. But when integration is complete, you emerge as a master of your own heart. You no longer chase love. You no longer wait for validation. You no longer define your worth externally. Instead, you walk forward grounded, free, and whole, carrying the essence of the connection not as a burden, but as a guiding light. And that is the true reward.